to the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast with your hosts, Kyle Borganoni and Matthew Betz.
Welcome in. Conference championship time here. Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Borganoni, and I am joined, as always, by Matthew. He's tracking Mac Hollins' injury report bets.
Checking his tummy, Kyle. His abdomen, if you will. What a guy. Look, we don't know if he's going to play, but if you're thinking about players that are going to lift their teammates, Mac Hollins showing up in Denver without shoes is the only way the Patriots can win this game. No, in all seriousness, it kind of affects the slate
things.
in some ways. There's some other injuries too, like Pat Bryant concussion, Troy Franklin with the hamstring, J.K. Dobbins, does he get activated or not? Those are all things we're tracking ahead of this weekend's games. The Final Four is here. Sadly, our Saturday football is now gone, which means I have to hang out with my family. But we do have Sunday football, so it should be an awesome two-game slate. I'm always very fond of this slate, Kyle. This is the infamous Gabe Davis slate for me.
Oh, yes.
Unfortunately, no Gabe Davis, in the playoffs this year at this part, but should be an awesome two games here. I think the biggest storyline, man, is the drop off from Bo Nix to Jarrett Stidham as big as the market thinks? Honestly, I feel like that's the biggest piece of the puzzle here to try to figure out. So we'll talk about that today. I'm excited to get your thoughts on that because I'm not going to lie, man. When Sean Payton called him Stiddy,
baby,
I immediately was like, man, maybe this guy's got game. I mean, you don't just throw that nickname around to anybody. So we'll see. But it should be great, man. Hopefully these two games are very fun. The playoffs have just been unbelievable so far. So hopefully it continues this weekend.
Stiddy. I've known a couple of Stiddies in my life. A couple of Stidhams. So I get the nickname. He's been on the team for a little bit. Last year, he was backing up Nix. Didn't get to really participate very much. I believe he had 4 rush attempts, which he didn't throw the ball. And then they had Zach Wilson. So I think the alternative in practice was Zach Wilson or Stiddy for a long time. And he kind of, they kept Stiddy around. It will be a conversation at $4.5K on DraftKings. What does he need to do relative to the other quarterbacks on the slate? We're obviously very big Drake May fans. And I just want to reiterate, when we're talking about these players, we can talk about them in the context of, I like watching Drake May play football. I like Matthew Stafford throwing no-look passes. I've seen Matthew Stafford play for a long time. And then we could say, what does this person have to do in DFS? And what is the opportunity cost of fading this player? Because honestly, with only 4 teams left, you're going to see so many different combinations. And we'll talk about some of the pricing structure. Like when I look at wide receiver, that's been one of the big conversations that I've been sorting through over the last day or so. Are you willing to pay up for, let's say, Puka at 9K, and then you're going to have to drop down just to make other salaries work in the 4K range? And it gets kind of dirty with Booty and Mims and Shaheed.
That dirty booty.
That's what I went for.
Yeah, that does kind of feel like the key to the slate in some ways, where you can poke holes in all those players, and that's why they're priced where they are, right? But like I said, we're still waiting on some injury news, which will shift projections and shift roster percentage in that range, notably with Mac Hollins and the Denver wide receiver injuries. But yeah, I feel like if you can get that part right, for the most part, you're going to see a ton of optimizers just give you Kem Walker without Zach Charbonnet, one of Puka or JSN, and kind of from there is how the slate will be decided. So I'm excited to break that down. I always feel like in these slates, getting into the nitty gritty of those types of players on a main slate, we would never spend that much time talking about how much this guy matters or doesn't. 3 catches versus 2 catches might decide the slate. On this slate, 2-game slates, every single, tenth of a point matters because the margins are so thin. So excited to break that down today. Should be an awesome show.
If you want to get all of our picks, dfspass.com. We've brought up people that have been playing with us throughout the playoffs because it's free right now. Free if you want to play with us. We still go throughout the playoffs. We will give props for the Super Bowl. We'll actually have 2 episodes coming up too. One to kind of preview the Super Bowl, talk about a showdown process, and then we will give some more props and break down the game. So last year was very, very good to Betz, if you don't know the story, but it was very good to him on a personal level with the Eagles winning, but also Xavier Worthy won him a lot of cash. So We really like the playoffs, really like the format, and we think that it would be fun if you could play with us. DFSpass.com, all of our content, everything is free. But we do have a fun little giveaway at this point in the season. I thought maybe we'd roll this out there. Betz did the checking on this, and we are almost at 2,000 ratings over on Apple Podcasts. So, in other words, if you will want to go over there and leave a review, leave a rating and leave a review, we will pick one of those and give away some free stuff. Free t-shirts, usually what we do.
Always fun to hit a milestone here. So 2,000 would be kind of cool to cross before next week's show. So yeah, if you are interested, that would really help us out a lot. I mean, corporate is just, they're pushing, man. We got to go door to door with sales for DFS Pass. They're really pushing it for next year. They're trying to get the ratings up on the show. You know, the corporate's really on us for this one. So if you guys could help us out, help Kyle and I keep our jobs, we'd really appreciate that. But no, in all seriousness, it really does help the show a lot. We really appreciate you guys for tuning in every single week. Every year, man, it flies by, and I'm always so sad when we get to this part of the year because I love the show, and hopefully you guys have enjoyed it this year as well. But again, yeah, that 5-star review really helps us out a lot. And then Kyle and I, like I said, we'll pick a review or two and give away a couple t-shirts in the next week.
I was just thinking about if the DFS Pass was something we had to mail out. Just like not like email, a hard copy. And it's like every week you're just waiting. And, you know, we got to get everything sent out on like a Thursday. So like all of our picks are wrong. All of the injury news is like 2 days early, but it gets shipped out 2-day shipping. We get it to you like on Saturdays.
Priority.
I'm really glad that we can kind of slowly go through the process. This is a digital, you know, product that we have with DFS Pass, and that you guys can kind of follow along because so much changes. You mentioned some of the injury stuff that we'll get to highlight, but the best plays is there on Saturday. You could find that in the DFS Pass as well. But leave a review and we'll pick one of you really, really fun people. But jump it in.
State of the main slate.
All right, let's talk about these games from like a high level point of view of like the feel, where the bets are. I know you've been tracking some of this, of where the public money is. And then you and I will break down the games. We'll do the stack attack. We will give you our slate breakers. We will prop it like it's hot. All the fun things. But on a 2-game slate, one of the games is sitting around 42.5. The other one was going between 46.5 and 47.5. We do have two different matchups that I think on paper, people are going to want to flood to Seattle and Los Angeles. So how does that present to us an opportunity in DFS to get early information from the Patriots and Broncos game?
Yeah, I was just kind of running a bunch of optimals and kind of seeing like what does the optimizer want you to play? The math, if you will, Kyle. And I'm getting a lot of RJ Harvey in there and a ton of Ken Walker in there, and then one of the expensive wide receivers and a ton of Denver Broncos defense. I don't know if you saw their price. They're $2,500, the DST is for Denver, which I don't want to say like feels wrong, but it's like we know this defense is talented, and Drake May, for as much as we love him, will fumble the ball, will take sacks, all those things. So I think you're going to see a ton of that combination on this 2-game slate.
Do you know why that's going to show up a ton? And I'll give you the analysis for it.
Buttlicker, our prices have never been lower.
That's why.
I mean, there were main slates this year where we were like, dude, I mean, the Jets are 2,500. How bad could that really be? And we know the Denver Broncos are actually talented. So that's kind of what the default, like, oh, these are the plays that are going to be jammed in there. Again, not right or wrong, just saying that's what the field is likely to be on. So one of my ways to attack this slate, I think, from a 2-game perspective is like, if you didn't play RJ Harvey with Denver Broncos defense, you're going to get a lot of early information to let you know, can you play Ken Walker in the late window or not? Because if your guys early fail, you probably got to get off Ken Walker. You know, he's going to be the massive chalk, like 80+%, I would say. In small field, I honestly could see it being 90% just because he's way too cheap for the role projected without Zach Charbonnet. So that's kind of how I'm thinking through this. Not that I won't have any RJ Harvey or any Denver Broncos defense, but I think just generally kind of thinking about like, how do I get information about how my lineup is looking going into the late window? That's my first kind of take on the slate.
Yeah, and I'm looking at some of the other players in that early game. Like Hunter Henry's going to get clicked a lot because there's just no tight ends on this slate that we have to really deal with. There's no Kelsey, which I was looking back at some of the last couple of years, like, oh, we were paying $6K for Kelsey every year for the last 5 or 6 years. because he was always in this championship game. So we're always having that conversation of what do you do? Should you play Kelsey? I think one of the ways I'm approaching this is, like you mentioned it with the Broncos defense. There's so much that could go wrong in this game, and a lot of that centers around Jarrett Stidham. So when you're pairing the Broncos defense with a cheap quarterback and a popular running back, you're kind of entering into a roster percentage problem where then the logical thing you would do, let's say you played Stidham, Harvey, Stidham because he's cheap, Harvey, Broncos defense, okay? You know where you have to spend the money because you already have so much to go around. Like, you're going to be playing Puka, you're going to be playing Ken Walker, you're probably going to be maybe fitting in JSN if you punt tight end. So it's like you actually get into a really, really common roster construction that way. So yeah, I think my early lean is to look at the Broncos and say, this is a good team. I think it can work, but I'm probably not going to play those three together. Stidham, Harvey, Broncos defense.
Makes a lot of sense, yeah. And one of my favorite ways to attack this slate, I think, is just playing Stidham as leverage off of RJ Harvey. Like, I don't know if you want to get into it right away here with the running backs, but like, flat out, RJ Harvey has not been very good as a runner. For as good as the Denver Broncos offense it is, and as far as their offensive line, now you get a rushing defense in New England that basically whenever Milton Williams has been on the field has wrecked the game for opposing running backs. Now, last week was Woody Marks and Houston that can't run the ball. The week before was a Chargers backup offensive line with now Omarion Hampton. So like the stats do look a little bit skewed. But if you remember early on, we were taking unders on like every running back going against New England in the first like 2.5 months of the year because they were so dominant. And they have shown that again recently when they got their starting players back. So I know RJ Harvey is going to project well from a median outcome standpoint here because of his pass catching. And we took his over on his receiving last week. That worked out well. But I do wonder, like, if Bo Nix is so good at throwing to running backs and it kind of works with getting the ball out quick and those sort of things, I wonder if that's going to keep up here, if that's going to change with Stidham. But overall, like, there's been so many slates recently where RJ Harvey feels like the chalk. And it's like, you got to play RJ Harvey. And he just hasn't buried you. Like, if he goes for like 60 scrimmage yards and 3 or 4 catches but doesn't find the end zone, you can definitely survive that on this slate. So I'm having a tough time buying into the chalk here with RJ Harvey. I get it. There's only, 4 main running backs you can play. But I'll be lower than market for sure on RJ Harvey.
The hardest part is that all of the running backs are lumped together. So normally what Betz and I would do on a Tuesday show is we'd, sort through the salaries and then we'd have like 3 or 4 days to digest it. Because there are very few running backs. Like you mentioned 4, you can add in Henderson as the 5th, even though he's probably not going to get clicked a ton. It's like all of those guys are going to project well at their price points. Ken Walker is going to project super well to the point of like he's going to get forced in every single lineup. I do think Ramondre Stevenson and Henderson are really fun pivot points if Harvey's going to catch this much steam. The thing about Harvey, and I was sorting through and trying to figure out, okay, like as a running back at 5,900, that is cheap. That is really cheap with this type of workload. As a receiver, Betz, did you know that he ranks 4th on this entire slate in targets per route run among all players? So like Puka, JSN, and then you got Diggs, and then it's RJ Harvey.
Makes a lot of sense. His role in the pass game has been very strong.
Yeah, I go back and forth because I agree he could be super inefficient on the ground. He could catch 4 to 5 balls. I mean, maybe they don't use it the same way with Nix and Stidham. And then at the end of the day, let's say he gives you 12 points at 5,900, that might be good on the slate. For sure. That's the worst part of analyzing this is I can look at a player and be like, this is inefficient. And then on a 2-game slate, it doesn't matter.
For sure, yeah. I will say, too, I want to get your thoughts on this. Do you think the pass rate changes this week? Because, like last week, we talk about it every week with the Bills. It's like, okay, you can run on the Bills. They want you to run. They're the biggest run funnel in the league. But with Bo Nix and with Sean Payton, they've been so pass-heavy ever since J.K. Dobbins went down. Even in that matchup with Buffalo, they only got off 10 total running back carries between RJ Harvey and Jaleel McLaughlin. So do you think that they stay super pass heavy even with Stidham in there? Because I think that changes kind of how you attack the slate. Basically, like, does Sean Payton trust Stiddy, as he says, to do the Bo Nix thing? And if he doesn't, then maybe RJ Harvey has a better day than we're talking about. But that's just something I'm trying to think through. And I think, quite honestly, we don't actually know the answer, but how are you approaching that situation?
I think it's easy for me to look at this and say, okay, in neutral game scripts, they'll want to run the ball more than they have. However, the offense, I think we would say is probably not as effective. But let's say you wanted to say that Stidham is 85% in terms of like efficiency as Bonix. Then they're going to end up needing more passing volume in general. So that's like part of the equation too, of like, if they're less efficient and the offense is bad, then there's this backdoor route in the second half. We'll talk about the game scripts where you are going to see some volume. Like I think one of the keys to this slate, I'm just going to put it out right now, is huge statement right here earlier in the podcast. Who is the right Broncos wide receiver? Because between Sutton and then you go to Marvin Mims, then you go to Lil Jordan, and then we still have to figure out the injury situation of Pat Bryant. Like there is some value there that I think these guys, like, we just won't want to click.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we're not really going to be able to talk through that specifically on the show until we get final injury reports out of Denver, because last week I played a lot of Pat Bryant, and I was like, oh, baby, we're cooking here. Dude, he was like
3 routes, 3 targets.
First quarter, he was just getting peppered, and then unfortunately gets the concussion. He was limited to start the week, which is usually a good sign for a player having a chance to clear protocol, so we'll see on his availability. And then Troy Franklin also hurt his hamstring after, I think it was just 8 routes last week, so he left pretty early, and we'll see on him. If one or both of those guys are out, then like, you know, they love to do the rotation type thing where like Sutton never leaves the field, but then the other guys just kind of rotate. If those guys both miss, Lil Jordan and Marvin Mims kind of just have to play a lot. If one or both those guys are in, then they can do the whole wide receiver rotation committee thing, which makes it tricky on projection standpoint. So I think understanding wide receiver and hamstring injuries, like, it's kind of a tough sell for me on Troy Franklin, even if he's in. But Pat Bryant has shown a pretty decent ability to earn targets. I don't mind Lil Jordan Humphrey, 37 routes last week. Again, kind of had to, but definitely is a player that produces more than you think he ever would. And then Marvin Mims, like, we kind of know the talent is there, but Sean Payton's been so reluctant to give him legit usage until, again, last week when they had to give it to him. So all that to say is I'm waiting to figure out how I want to take a stand here, but they're so cheap. I mean, Sutton's 5,700, Pat Bryant's 4,400, Lil Jordan 34, and then Marvin Mims 4,200. Like, if you wanted to play a Stidham double, you're asking, can Stidham give me 15 points? Can these guys combined give me, 20 points? And like, if it's a low scoring slate and the more expensive players fail, that can totally work. So I am definitely interested in the stacks just because, like I said, I think RJ Harvey might struggle on the ground, and then you don't have to have a huge game from Stidham and the pass catchers to pay it off.
Yes. So you mentioned the Broncos injury situation. We talked about, is Mac Hollins going to play? We're still waiting on that as of this recording. Because the games are on Sunday, there's still going to be stuff that trickles out over the next day or so. But in the Rams and Seahawks game, real quick, I want to talk about injuries, and then we'll highlight the games from a DFS perspective. What are the main things that you're looking for? I mean, I know that at this point it's smaller stuff, but like the Seattle offensive line is something that I think is super important. We need to talk about injury-wise. We're still figuring out their backup running back situation, which is hilarious. We get to talk about Velus Jones and George Halani.
Hey, how could you forget about Cam Akers?
I totally forgot he was on the team.
Revenge game for Cam Akers, if he's activated. Obviously, Charbonnet tearing his ACL is just brutal timing. Definitely feel for him, and for next year, it's going to linger into the season too. So big decisions when they get past this playoff window on what goes on there. But that's why Kenneth Walker projects off the charts, right? It's because we don't know who the running back 2 is, and quite frankly, it might not matter. Like, they might all get a touch or two. We think Rashid Shaheed's going to work in for a couple carries here or there just because to help manufacture some touches as well. But the real key to me is the left tackle situation. They have Charles Cross dealing with a foot injury, didn't practice to start the week. The backup left tackle didn't practice to start the week. And the third string left tackle did not practice to start the week. And they love Zach Charbonnet for pass protection as well. So thinking about all of those factors, how does that affect Sam Darnold, who we know is very pressure sensitive, or at least has shown that tendency throughout his career? So yeah, we're monitoring the offensive line for sure for Seattle.
Okay, because I think when we look at, like, when I was breaking down the game, I was like, I should have so much confidence in Ken Walker, I should almost just move on. And then I was trying to build out a game script where he either isn't as valuable as we think, and Sam Darnold has to drop back 35 times, something we don't really see that much. So it does matter, and we'll break down more of that stuff. But let's take a quick break, and then we'll get into the games.
Stack Attack.
First game we're going to break down is the New England Patriots at the Denver Broncos. This feels like an old school AFC battle. Brady, Manning, but instead it's Stiddy. Stiddy in May, as they say. I'm seeing a line right now. It's been moving back and forth of New England. I'm seeing -4.5. It was 5.5 earlier. The over-under's at 42.5. Where are the people placing their money? Do you know that part?
Well, I think it's important to note before the news of Bo Nix's ankle injury, this line basically shifted like 5.5, 6 points. Is kind of what people are, or what the odds makers anyway, are saying Nix versus Stidham is worth the spread. And it seems like a lot of people initially were piling into New England. Then it got to a point where it was like, it's too many points at home for the Broncos. And now you're seeing money come in on the Broncos side. But I think the vast majority of bets early on have been placed on the Patriots. And it feels like one of those things where a lot of people are going to be placing parlays using Patriots money line. So I feel pretty confident the books will be rooting for the Broncos here.
The question is how bad can Jarrett Stidham be? Which almost is unfair because he's only has 4 career starts and he's actually been okay, like as a starter.
Fine.
Yeah. I remember him at Auburn and watching a lot of SEC football, and it almost doesn't matter whatever your talent evaluation is of Jarrett Stidham because you haven't seen him play football very much other than the preseason. And at 4,500, I feel like I'm very excited to play him. And excited to play him against the Patriots defense that you can throw on. Now, the one place that you really can't throw on them is Christian Gonzalez. We'll talk about that conversation of how he trails Courtland Sutton. But teams have gotten there against the Patriots, like passing. And you haven't seen it in the playoffs because the Texans and Chargers have been train wrecks up front. This is a really good offensive line. So I think Stidham is a good play at his price point. And I'm not like this line early on at 5.5, if it got to 6, I was like, man, I think I would take the Broncos.
Yeah, I do agree. I think it probably got out a little too far, but like I said, now it's coming back in favor of the Broncos. And really with Stidham, like if you think about this on a main slate, like a full 12-game main slate or something, I've played worse guys than 4,500 in my life, for sure. So I'm not a talent evaluator at the quarterback position. What do I know? But like, it's a small sample. But in 4 career starts, we have stat lines as a passer of 224 yards, 1 touchdown. 272 yards, 1 touchdown. 365 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 picks. 219 yards and a touchdown and a pick. Anything around like 220 to 250 passing and a touchdown with some rushing on the ground probably is enough at this price, quite frankly. So yeah, you don't want to just copy and paste like, this is what we did in the preseason, this is what we'll definitely do in this game, because the Patriots have been a lot more aggressive in the playoffs with blitzing and kind of creating havoc. I'm sure a lot of that was game plan specific against the Chargers, who can't block anybody. And then last week with Stroud, no Nico Collins, offensive line wreck as well. So I'm not sure if they'll do the exact same thing here, but it's like, man, they're underdogs. The pass rate has been there with Peyton. Like, even if it's not the most efficient thing in the world, I don't know, 13, 14 points here. If, let's say, May, Stafford, and Darnold, nobody eclipses 20 points at that salary, that probably can work. So yeah, I do have a lot of interest in Jarrett Stidham here, and just kind of hope that the scheme and the pass rate just kind of get him home for DFS, even if it isn't the most efficient performance in the world.
I think the hardest thing is looking at a 18.5 implied total and going, man, that's not something I usually want to invest in. But if I look at 4 teams, I go, okay, it doesn't really matter. Do I think the Broncos win? And if they win, then I think Stidham can be a part of that conversation. We mentioned the wide receivers. There's a lot up in the air. I feel like Evan Ingram is so far off my radar that I haven't thought about him at all.
Neither have I.
It's sad because you would like to be able to have a conversation at 3,300 on DraftKings and say, he could PPR his way there. It hasn't happened, man, at all.
Yeah, last week he ran about half the routes, even with all the wide receiver injuries, which is kind of tough because he really is like a slot wide receiver. So I would love for the wide receivers, one of these guys to be out, Pat Bryant, Troy Franklin, to feel better about it. But look, it's a 2-game slate. We got 4 teams. There's no McBrides, elite tight ends on the slate. It's like, if the tight ends all happen to fail and you're just looking for like the guy that scored a touchdown, sure, Evan Ingram could do it. So I probably won't play him as a one-off, but maybe if you're doing like a 20 max or 150 set, including him as a partner in some of your Stidham stacks make sense.
The best part about the Broncos is, they're cheap across the board. And then if you are playing a Stidham double stack, you can include Harvey as the pass catcher. But, Sutton's probably going to come in 5th or 6th in roster percentage. And then if we do get one of the other guys, Pat Bryant or Troy Franklin in the mix, it's going to really bring that down even further. So I like the idea of playing multiple Broncos wide receivers because I think people say, I don't know which one it is. I'll just go Harvey and Lil Jordan or Harvey and Mims, whoever. When playing 2 of those together, I think you can really get some leverage on the field and get early information.
Yeah, I like that call a lot. Why are you laughing, Kyle, when you say Lil Jordan?
He's not little.
I know. And they actually moved him into the slot a decent amount last week, too, which is kind of funny because...
Big slot, Lil Jordan?
Big slot, Lil Jordan. Yeah, that's what I'll be watching for on Sunday. But no, I like that call. Again, it's just a price thing, right? It's like, if this stack combined can give us like 25 to 30 points between your Stidham 2 pass catchers, like that might be enough. So yeah, I have some interest here. And like I mentioned earlier, just as leverage off RJ Harvey, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Okay. So I mentioned Harvey as a pass catcher. I mean, it's pretty great. He set a season high in route participation last week. Another game went to overtime. So there's a lot of opportunities, 6 targets, but it's pretty good considering the slate. Like, Kenneth Walker's never been like a high-end pass catcher. Kyron's never been that guy. And then Ramondre and Travion also split. So Harvey as the guy that you can count on seems intriguing to me at 5,900, but he is going to carry a lot of roster percentage.
And that'll change too. We're assuming J.K. Dobbins doesn't play, but if he's in, obviously that shifts things quite a bit.
I would be shocked if he plays.
Me too.
Okay. Was that more
of
like...
Just saying it's possible.
Was that like post-Knicks, they needed like some like positive injury vibes?
Maybe. I mean, it's funny because like, that's the 21-day window and the Super Bowl is basically 3 weeks away. So it's like, we might as well activate him and just see what happens. So I think they're probably just getting him kind of ready to maybe play in the Super Bowl if they can advance. I'd be very surprised if he plays. I can almost guarantee you if he is active in this game, you will see a prop from us on something related to an under on J.K. Dobbins. So not going to make my player pool even if he's in, but it will shift things with Harvey a little bit.
It feels like you're like piling on a guy who's he feels like he's out there in crutches because that's his entire career. I feel like his entire career has been him hurt and then us trying to like take advantage of it.
He's so good too. It's really a bummer.
Dude, he was a really fun prospect coming out of Ohio State. So let's go over to the Patriots side because as much as we love Drake May, and we really do, we love him, there's some volatility, right? Like Drake May takes sacks. He also took the most quarterback responsible sacks of any quarterback in the NFL. So in other words, it wasn't just like the offensive line gave up room. It was Drake May trying to create something. And we love the scrambles, but there is some volatility where I don't think he's just an easy click despite being the most talented quarterback left in the field. At 6K though, Betz, that's so cheap. I keep bringing it up. Like we've been paying 7, 8K in the past for really good quarterbacks. And this is 6K for a guy who's averaging 30 rushing yards per game.
For sure. Yeah. I like your point on that because I can see a path where this kind of goes south for May just because he does hold on to the ball. He needs to stop fumbling. Will Campbell has not looked the same since coming back from injury. We know what the edge rushers can do for Denver. For last week's game, like I thought it was insane. I looked back at the numbers. Did you realize CJ Stroud, for as horrible as he had a higher success rate than Drake May in that game? And that's only one metric, but it's like it speaks to the boom bust ability of Drake May, where like there will be bad moments and there will be great moments. Now, for me, I lean that this will be a better game for Drake May than the public thinks because we talked about it last week, right? This Denver defense is just not the same as what it was early on. We talked about that, like, I'm not sure if it's small sample or what, or, if it's just a blip on the radar. And then Josh Allen and the Bills come out and hang 30 on him. So you've seen Buffalo 30, the Jags 34, the Packers 34, the Raiders 24. Washington put up 26 on this team since the bye week, and those are 2 games included in that sample as well against Chris Oludukin and Trey Lance. So like when they've played legit teams recently, they have not been great. And specifically, I love the stat from Next Gen Stats. We know May just crushes intermediate area. I know, Kyle, you love that stat. Since the bye week, Denver's 28th in completion percentage allowed 10 to 19 yards down the field. That's what Drake May can do. That's where Stephon Diggs lives. That's where Hunter Henry lives. So I really like this spot for May. Diggs, Hunter Henry, and I'm kind of fading like this Denver defense is going to dominate narrative that a lot of people have out there.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that's boosting Denver in optimizers is being 2,500. And there's narratives at play too. But like that's such a cheap price that they're going to project well in a game that has a lower total. But at the end of the day, Drake May is going to show up as our best value, because when you start doing the math and you go, hey, let's say he throws 2 picks. Let's say it's not as glorious as we think. If you run for a little bit, let's say he gets one on the ground too, 1 passing, 1 rushing, 30 yards on the ground, that adds up. And on this slate, Stafford's a 0 on the ground. Darnold's not going to do much. Who knows with Stiddy, man? Maybe Stiddy's just guns blazing.
Stiddy's a wild card.
He kind of is. It's kind of fun. So I do think that's a good call of basically saying if the public is going to, think of Denver's defense as this awesome unit, they're not the same that they were last year. I think that's what we talked about last week in the Buffalo game. But I think my favorite piece in this game is not a sentence that I thought I would say at all. In fact, I did not know that when it came to conference championship DFS, I would be talking about guys like Stiddy, or Lil Jordan. And I definitely did not think that I would be in Ramondre Stevenson's corner.
I love Ramondre this week, man. I'm with you.
It feels bad. It feels wrong.
It does, man. The rookie should be peaking as the year goes on. And Travion in the playoffs has been horrendous. It's small sample size, 2 games, but 2.5 yards per carry over the last couple of weeks for Travion. And last week was like kind of unique. If you look at just the box score, it looks like, it was pretty even split. Ramondre had 16 carries, Travion had 12, routes were 16 to 11, like pretty much a 50-50 split. But really, if you kind of understand what was happening, Ramondre had that period of time where he was getting his eye checked out on the sideline, and Travion came in for like a couple drives in a row. If that wouldn't have happened, I think this split would look massively different, where it's like, Ramondre got almost everything last week. So look, again, if you're playing a bunch of lineups, you want to embrace the variance. What if Travion rips off a long one? All those things, which he can do. I will have way more Ramondre than Travion this week, and I will have way more Ramondre than RJ Harvey this week.
I hate that we're on the same page, but I got to give you some more stats about Ramondre, because over the last 6 games, that includes the playoffs, he's averaged 7.3 yards per carry on 55 carries, okay? He has a 13% explosive rush rate, which is insane. His 71% rush success rate is the highest of any running back. He's been wild. And then the type of runner that he is and the type of scheme that they've had a lot of success is the man gap concept, where a lot of times you're pulling a guard or you're pulling somebody. And Denver's been really, really, really bad against it. Like 27th in rush success rate, 22nd yards per carry allowed. It's one of the weaknesses of this team. You kind of saw it last week with James Cook. Like there are moments where Denver as a rush defense is just not as good, and they haven't been good in the second half of the season. So all 4 of Ramondre's rushing touchdowns over the last 6 weeks have come on man and gap concepts. He's running at 8 yards per carry in those schemes. So he's just been awesome the last 6 weeks, really. Travion had that period where it's like, this is it. He's taking over, and Ramondre was out for a while. And now you're kind of seeing like, hey, yes, we want the more explosive player, but fantasy stuff aside, like Ramondre's been really good in this scheme.
And they trust him too. And like, this is the part of the year where it's like, we're not going to mess around with just making both guys happy. Like if they trust Ramondre, they're going to play him more. They're trying to get to the Super Bowl. So I love it. Yeah. And since the bye, Denver's 19th in EPA per rush defensively. I was looking at Ramondre's prop, not a big over guy, Kyle, but
an over Ramondre guy.
It's in like the mid 40s for rushing. It felt low. I don't know. I'm just putting it out there, but I do like Ramondre. And one of the things I was thinking through again, because I'm going to play a bunch of lineups. I might go 150, Kyle. I might get a little crazy this weekend. And so, yes, I think there's a world that exists where Stidham can be good enough at a salary. But don't get me wrong. I also think there's a world that exists where Stidham might be terrible. We don't really know, right? And this Patriots defense, like I said, will blitz. They will try to create turnovers. They will try to create havoc. If they're successful, they are favored here by 4.5, 5 points. I think you can pair Ramondre with the Patriots defense, get big-time leverage on RJ Harvey, big-time leverage on the Denver defense. So I'm definitely interested in that angle as well.
Yeah, one of the stacks that I wrote up was Ramondre, New England defense, and then having 1 to 2 Denver wide receivers, where you're just saying, hey, there's volume in the second half. It's gross, but these players are so cheap. So if it's your boy Lil Jordan, it wouldn't shock me if he ended up with, 4 receptions, 3 or 4 receptions, and that's what it is. We got to sort out those wide receivers and the injuries, but I do like that a lot. My question is, are you playing Drake May with one of these New England running backs, and then Hunter Henry would be your preferred stacking partner over Diggs?
I like both guys. 4,800 feels like no man's land pricing-wise for Hunter Henry. Maybe that keeps his roster percentage in check a little bit, but I do think it's a good spot for him. Like Denver, we talked about it last week with the matchup with the Bills guys. During the regular season, they saw the 7th most targets to tight ends. So kind of in that middle area of the field is generally where teams choose to attack them. I think that's more of a Pat Surtain stat than anything. But that's where Hunter Henry will run his routes. And if you do think this Denver pass rush can get home and create pressure, might be looking for Hunter Henry there a little bit more as a safety valve. And then Steph Diggs, it was really frustrating in the regular season because it felt like every time you thought you could play him, then they would just pull him back to like 60% of the routes, But in the playoffs, that's jumped to 82% of the routes. Is that Mac Hollins related? Is that just it's crunch time and Diggs is our best weapon, so let's put him out there? I'm not sure. But yeah, he's been a guy that's been out there way more than he was in the regular season. And like I mentioned with May and this kind of stat with the intermediate area, to me, that's a Diggs game. So I'll have more Diggs and Henry than Booty and Kyle Williams personally.
They have been moving him around a lot more. Like they've been putting him in the slot a bunch more than he was. So like last week, that was one of the things they did to get him away, and he got there. Diggs is hard because I that sentiment you just shared of like every time I think I'm going to get a safe PPR game, he just kind of vanishes. But I do think his skill set works a lot at 5,800 for him to see 8 targets. Yeah. And on this slate, like there's just not a lot of dudes in that mid-range. You're paying up for Puka or JSN, or you're going Diggs, Sutton. Like there's just not, Devontae's cheap for Devontae Adams at 6K. But when I adjust for salary, I think it's just easy for me to get to Diggs than Sutton or Devontae Adams.
I do. I agree. I think I prefer Diggs over Sutton. I honestly feel like the field probably will feel the same on that. So maybe from a game theory standpoint, it makes sense to lean into Sutton here, but I definitely prefer the on-paper spot for Diggs over Sutton. And I think Hunter Henry's interesting too.
Yeah, when you compare to the other tight ends on the slate, first read targets, target share, receiving yards, the stuff we care about, just the simple statistics, there's no one close. It's Colby Parkinson inside the red zone and then a bunch of other randos. All right, any last thoughts on the Patriots jabroni wide receivers? That's mean to Kayshon Boutte because he's been good all year and good for his role on the team. But like Kyle Williams, Demario Douglas, Efton Chisholm III.
Not necessarily any hot takes here. Last week, it was 16 routes for Kyle Williams to only 14 for Pop Douglas. Chisholm ran just 3 total routes. So I won't be playing any of him. And then, of course, if Mac Hollins is back, that will change a lot of the equation for Kyle Williams. So just keep an eye on projections. They're all dart throws that you can include as part of game stacks here, but outside of that, there's no data that suggests this is the guy you should play.
I short circuit every time I see the name Kyle Williams. That's my uncle's name. And then I was just with him this past weekend, like the whole weekend at the wedding. So just
maybe that's a sign
that I need to play him.
Yeah. The piece you need.
We used to play Pop Dougie back in the day in cash. Mm-hmm. That was fun like a year or two ago.
Yeah.
And now
he's touchdown last week.
I can't really get there. I can't in good conscience. If you're playing 150, then if you're playing May double stacks, then I want to add in probably Williams.
Mm-hmm.
That's just
makes sense.
All right, give me your Vegas take.
Oh man, I will take the spread in favor of the Broncos, but I think the Patriots will win this game.
Gosh, I wanted to give some answer like that, and I was like, I can't give an answer like that.
Why not?
Because then it feels like I'm saying. So I would be saying in this instance, Broncos plus 4.5 or Broncos plus 5, but I think the Patriots win the game.
That's exactly what I just said.
I can't do that.
And whenever we agree, it never fails.
That's what I'm saying. I'm just going to say Patriots in the points. Just get a little different here. Get a little weird. All right. Let's take a quick break and we'll talk about the other game. It is Rams at Seahawks. The Seahawks are 2.5-point home favorites. The over-under is at 46.5. These teams played in Week 11, where the Rams won 21-19 on just 115 combined plays, which that might not mean a lot to you, but the next time they played in Week 16 was that awesome Thursday night overtime game, the old Eric Saubert to win the game, but Zach Charbonnet somehow got a 2-point conversion to make it tied up. That game had 143 combined plays. So those two games went very different from each other in terms of game pace and scoring and all that stuff. The total kind of reflects something in between, and the fact that the Seahawks over the last month haven't allowed an offensive touchdown or a 20-plus yard play. So it's looking at the Rams offense, looking how it's been a machine most of the year. Puka's been amazing. And then looking at the Seahawks defense and saying this, like Mike McDonald deserves to be coach of the year along with Vrabel and lots of other names, but he's been incredible. This defense has been incredible. Where do you want to start the conversation?
Man, that Seahawks defense is unbelievable. Like, they don't have a weakness, right? I mean, the rushing defense is awesome. Their pass defense is awesome. They're so good in special teams because of what Rashid Shaheed is doing in the return game right now. So, like, Seattle DST is definitely interesting to me. That said, when you look at what the Rams have done in this matchup, Stafford and Puka went absolutely berserk on that Thursday night game. So I understand it's a tough matchup, but if you're just thinking about like players that can have a really high ceiling performance this week, like we're trying to paint the case on like, you know, Pat Bryant and Lil Jordan and maybe Steph Diggs runs 85% of the routes and we don't really know, but it's like Puka can break the slate. So to me, the key here is like, is the $1,000 difference on DraftKings between Puka and JSN enough to push you onto more JSN, or are you playing more Puka? Because that, to me, that's where a lot of people are going to start their lineup is like, which stud wide receiver do I want? And quite frankly, I don't know the answer, man. Like, I want both these guys, but I'm not going to lie. I'm a little shook with what Darnold has done in this matchup, especially if we have some O-line concerns. So what are you thinking through with Puka and JSN?
As of this recording, subject to change, I think the $1,000 matters in terms of construction. And because JSN is not like some like terrible consolation prize. Like,
right,
this
yeah,
is
for sure.
He's going to project super well. I know in our optimizer, like he presents himself as one of the best GPP values because he's only 8K, which almost feels disrespectful.
It's definitely closer on FanDuel. They're only $400 difference. So I think over there, you're probably leaning more into Puka, I would think. But yeah, on DraftKings, I mean, $1,000 is a lot.
Yeah. The conversation this week of Puka and JSN $1,000 and then Puka and Devontae $3,000 is intriguing to me, like from a game theory perspective.
It's been so long since Devontae's had a game.
I looked it up. It was week 13. He scored 2 touchdowns, but the yardage has never been there. Like, he is competing with Colby Parkinson in terms of receiving yards per game since then.
And part of that's injury too, right? Missed some time with the hamstring and stuff. So, yeah, I mean, look, he's a player that could get there at this salary on like 4 catches and 2 of them are touchdowns. We've seen that a bunch, with him throughout the year. So he's interesting. I played him a lot last week and I was just definitely disappointed in overall like how he performed, but really just Stafford. Like, Stafford and McVay kind of had a down game last week, and you heard them both talk about it. They're like, McVay was like, I didn't call a very good game. Stafford admitted he's like, I wasn't super accurate. We just weren't on. Anytime I feel like those two guys, which we know over a big enough sample are 2 of the best in the game at what they do, have a down game, I kind of want to just bet on them coming back and bouncing back here. So I'm definitely interested in being a little bit more overweight the field, Stafford and Puka this week. I
mean, I get it. I think the conversation has been over this week, like McVay went away from what he has been doing in terms of 13 personnel. So they were playing a lot of heavy tight end sets for most of the year. In fact, here's what's weird about McVay. He's always been 11 personnel guy. You go all the way back to what? Kupp and, Robert Woods, those days. That was what they did. And it was like Tyler Higbee at tight end. It's kind of like, oh, this is nice. This year, they did not have their first snap in 13 personnel until week 6. So I wonder if McVay was like up late on the whiteboard and was like, what if we just went heavy set for the rest of the year? Like, what if we did it more than any team that's ever done it over the last like 7 years? And that's where they've been. That's where they've lived. That's why you've seen this spike for Colby Parkinson. It's where you've seen these moments for Tyler Higbee. You get these deep shots with Terrence Ferguson. Like, it works in the NFL. And honestly, Seattle's done that a lot this year too, 12 and 13 personnel. Then last week, they went back to 11 personnel. So do you think McVay kind of wakes up and be like, let's just go back to our bread and butter?
It's funny. Yeah. I wonder, just trying to get like inside his head, was he like, they'll never see this coming because we haven't done this all year.
And I agree. We did not.
Nobody saw it come in. Watching that game, like the first like couple pass like completions from Stafford, I was like, is that Jordan Whittington? He hasn't played like at all this year. And all of a sudden he has, a bunch of routes. Him and Mumfield both on the field for over 20 routes last week. Mumfield ran more routes than any of the tight ends. So you have to ask yourself, like, which of these two versions do you believe? I personally think, given the matchup, they go back to the heavier stuff because Seattle can be beat through the tight end position over the middle of the field. They have been unbelievable at limiting big plays. And I think about, like, how do I just keep this thing going? It's like these intermediate type routes to some of these tight ends, to Puka over and over again, that type of stuff. So I'd be surprised if they ran it back the way they did last week, but admittedly, we don't really know. I think you just have to kind of take your best guess here. But if I had to make an educated guess, I'd say probably more of the heavy personnel stuff.
On the year, Seattle's defense shows 2-eye safety looks 56% of the time. That's the sixth highest rate in the NFL. So that's a good percentage for us to work off of in how they've attacked opposing offenses. It is an interesting area where Devontae Adams is ahead of Puka Nacua in targets per route run. It's like you can't find Puka not being 1 or 2 in the entire league. So to find any split where he's ahead of him in terms of targets per route run, in terms of first read targets, and fantasy points per route run, it does at least bring Devontae back in the conversation to me. Like he's been really, really bad. Against 2-eye safety looks, he's been good. Now, you add in the fact of Puka just going bonkers, 227 and 2. Can you play both of them together?
I haven't started to build lineups yet, but just thinking about that, like assuming you're doing that, you're probably playing them with Stafford, whose price is the quarterback 1. You're going to have to be somewhere in the cheap range though for wide receiver at like Denver or
Lil Jordan,
Kyle Williams types. Lil Jordan's the key on the slate. You're probably gonna have to play a couple of those nasty boys.
I know, like we were paying $7,500, $7,800 for Adams for a long time. So like double stacking them together was kind of one of those things. Like I'm not paying up for that. Like here's what Stafford, Puka, Devontae have to do to 3 or 4x on their salary. On a main slate, we would have just said, no, I'm not doing that. On this 4-game slate, I think a 6K Devontae Adams is intriguing, and the raw projection for Puka is going to be there. So if you think the Rams win this game, we've kind of said their targets have been 70% these two dudes. So I don't think it's a bad bet, and I just wonder if people approach it as I need to play Puka or Devontae.
Yeah, that makes sense too. And this is the higher game total, right? So like if Denver and New England is lower scoring, 2017, something like that, and just the raw points in this game matter a lot more, then that would make a lot of sense to me. So yeah, definitely is a good angle to attack. I agree.
Yeah. The one thing that I will say is the way that Devontae plays is like, these inside the 10 touchdowns. It's kind of been his thing all year. It kind of takes away from Kyron because like who's going to get the red zone touchdown? So I don't usually play those two together, and I looked it up. Their correlation coefficient bets, just so you need to write this down.
Nerd.
Negative 0.49.
That doesn't sound very good.
It's not good at all. So you don't want to really play those two together normally. I'm going to have somebody that's going to do it, and these two are going to score the 2 touchdowns, and they're going to punch me in the face. But I'm just saying, over the course of the year, it hasn't worked out.
According to Kyle's spreadsheets, this is not a good idea.
And yet,
and those spreadsheets never let us down.
Dude, those spreadsheets didn't enter one contest. They're just sitting there running the math, doing all that stuff. Any other takes you want to give? I think the tight ends is worth a conversation for the Rams.
For sure, yeah. Especially because, like we said, I mean, a tight end on the slate, these guys are all cheap across the board. So it's like you're really just touchdown hunting no matter who you play. And so with Stafford, if you think he throws multiple touchdowns here, it's like maybe one of them goes to a tight end. You can include any of these guys. Colby Parkinson ran 21 routes last week. Terrence Ferguson, surprisingly, off the hamstring, ran 18 routes last week, and Higbee only ran 8. I don't know, again, if that's sticky or what, but like, again, I don't want to give cop-out answers here, but it's like when there are so many uncertainties in the playing time here, how the targets could go in this range, I think you just want to include these guys all in your player pool as part of your Stafford stacks. My favorite is probably Ferguson, if I'm being honest, just because he's 2,700, and like when he hits, we know he's getting the ball down the field. Whereas like with Higbee and Parkinson, they kind of have to have not volume, but like they're not seeing these 20 plus air yard targets. Like it's weird how Ferguson is only seeing those, but he can get there on like 1 or 2 catches because of that. And again, because of his salary. So like if he catches, I don't know, 2 or 3 passes and one of them's that 20 yard play, that can work. Again, at only 2,700. So I like him a lot here, but again, I don't feel confident in any of these guys from a playing time routes perspective because there's uncertainty after what we saw last week.
I think they're all really fun pieces. At 2,700, that gives you some interesting roster combinations. Like when you just think about the salary you're saving and just different than anyone else.
And if you want to try to maybe jam in a lineup or two that has both JSN and Puka, that's one way to make it work.
The way you make Puka and JSN work is a Turd-Ferg Jr.
You need a Turd-Ferg in there. You probably need a Denver defense in there. You might need a Stiddy in there.
You might need a Stiddy. That's true.
But it is possible.
Just to speak to it, this stat blew my mind. We brought it up on the Dynasty podcast. Terrence Ferguson led all tight ends in the NFL, like all of them in 20-plus air yard targets, like more than Trey McBride, more than anybody else in the league. But it was 52% of his targets. So 50% of the time, he saw a target 20-plus air yards downfield. Just Terrence run. And we knew that coming out of Oregon when we profiled him. Like, this is the kind of player he is.
It's kind of funny. They use him. Everything we thought Tutu Atwell would be for this offense. The clear out guy down the field. It's a rookie tight end and it's only those routes.
Dude, that's amazing. I'm going to get real weird here. Can you play 2 Rams tight ends?
I think you could.
Because then you're basically saying I'm playing Puka and JSN.
Yeah, and you're probably playing Stafford in that scenario and just saying I'm playing a Stafford triple here with Puka and 2 tight ends. I think you could, for sure.
Okay, it's definitely one of those don't tell me how to have a good time, because I'll do it. Rams running backs. Kyren saw most of the carries last week. Like, Corum was on the field, but then they just didn't give him the ball. It was kind of weird. Like, he just didn't all. Kyron's been incredible, dude. The big plays have never really been his thing as a runner, but number 1 in the NFL in rush success rate, number 1 in terms of lowest percentage of runs stuffed the line, and number 1 in terms of percentage of runs that go for 5+ yards. He does what he's supposed to do for this team. And they really trust him, and the whole thing, the conversation the whole year was let's keep him fresh for the playoffs. So at 6,500, he is the RB1 in salary. Is he more of a leverage piece on Ken Walker, or can you play those two together?
You can play them together. I really think Ken Walker is a pretty good play just from a projection standpoint. Like, even if he fails, like air quotes fails, what does that mean? Like 10 points, 12 points, even if he doesn't go for 25, which we would all love because we love Ken Walker in fantasy, like just the raw points, the raw touches matter so much on this slate. Like I said, if you're getting early information from the Denver game for some contrarian pieces and they fail, you might have to get off Ken Walker. But overall, I think he's a pretty good play. He will be massively rostered. But yeah, you can play these guys together for sure. The rules that we normally have for these main slates kind of go out the window. On these small slates, you can play defense against your quarterback. You can play multiple players against your defense, 2 running backs in the same game, multiple tight ends from the same team. You really do want to kind of embrace more variance on these small slates. So yes, you definitely can play Kyren and Ken Walker together. As
you say, you let your hair down in these instances. So what I'm hearing Betz saying is Stiddy at QB. That's a given. 2 running backs in the same game.
Oh, brother.
You obviously want to play a defense against your quarterback, and then you want to play 2 tight ends from the same team.
So Stidham throws a pick 6. So I'm playing Patriots defense. He is then forced to throw a lot, so you get the volume from him at a cheap price.
With Lil Jordan.
PPR volume for the pass catchers in Denver. Stafford throws 2 touchdowns, 1 to each of his tight ends. Yeah, I can see this working. Definitely.
There is a path for a lot of this stuff. All right, let's go to the Seattle side. We know what Seattle wants to do. They're number 1 in rush rate, number 1 in second half rush rate, and then when they get inside the red zone, they're running at 57% of the time. The weirdest thing about Seattle, if I just gave you that statistic, you'd be like, all right, we got to get on the run game. They haven't been that good at it. Like, for a team that's kind of built their identity, and we knew that in the offseason when Clint Kubiak came over, like, they're going to run the ball. That's what they're talking about. They're 29th in rush success rate. They're 29th in EPA per rush. They're 25th in yards per carry. They basically had big plays and bunny touchdowns. Like, that's what Zach Charbonnet was, just these short little touchdowns. So I can't argue with Kenneth Walker. I can't argue with this price. But I do need to just mention that they haven't been good at running the ball this year.
And that's kind of always been the Ken Walker thing, right? This boom bust running style where there's games where like he looks incredible and he's ripping off huge plays. And there's other games where he's trying to bounce it to the left side or the right side and gets tackled for a 4-yard loss, and it kind of sets him back. And so I think there's a volatility aspect to Ken Walker's game that can be good, but also can have some downsides to it too. Yeah. And they trust Zach Charbonnet to pick up, the old footballism type stuff, the short yardage, keep ahead of the chains, yada, yada, nose for the end zone, all the things that your grandpa likes to talk about when you watch football. That's kind of not what Ken Walker does. That's what Zach Charbonnet does. But yeah, look, they have not been awesome at running the ball, but at the same time, we talked about it last week, this Rams rush defense has kind of been middling, I would say, in the last several weeks.
The key to the game, let me just say it right here. All right, this is going to be like I'm talking on Fox or wherever the game is, and I'm telling you the keys of the game, which are like, before the game, they show a little graphic. And it's
win the turnover battle.
Yeah,
Field
win the
position.
turnover. Run the ball a lot, like all those things. But I really do think this is the key to the game. It's play action. Is Sam Darnold able to, if they're able to establish some type of running game, you can, play action where he was second in yards per attempt and tied for second with Stafford in fantasy points per dropback. He was really, really good. And Betz and I were looking up the splits earlier. These teams have played twice this year. Sam Darnold, when he doesn't use play action, has thrown 5 picks. It's been really, really bad. But, when he does use play action, it's been really, really good. The Rams defense ranked 28th completion percentage allowed to play action, but they allowed only 3 passing touchdowns. They were kind of fortunate over the course of the season to not give up as much counting stats as you think. But we know JSN's in play. I really like AJ Barner. I know we talked him up last week. I still feel like this is a good spot for him. Now, obviously, you can't play 3 tight ends. You can't play 2 Rams tight ends and AJ Barner. But if I could, I would.
Well, I mean, that sounds like a great way to finish last in your contest. The question for me on Sam Darnold is like, and I don't want to be like you said, kind of like what you see with the media where it's like, does playoff Darnold show up here? Does he implode? But it's like, in all honesty, like Chris Shula has had his number every time they faced him. Basically, he is 1-3 against the Rams over the last couple years with Shula there. He has thrown 5 touchdowns and 7 interceptions, going back to also the game against them last year when he was with Minnesota. So there's not big sample size, there's a decent-ish sample size here, and he really hasn't been super efficient. Now, in the first game, it was a disaster. In the second game, because of the wild nature of the game, it was still fine for fantasy. He still scored enough points, especially at, 5,500 or something on DK. Like, yeah, he might throw a pick or 2, but if he puts up 16 DraftKings points, it might be enough, So he will make my player pool, but I think out of all the quarterbacks in this slate, knowing the left tackle concerns, knowing the splits against this defense, and just for whatever reason they give him trouble, I will probably be underweight Darnold stacks.
Yeah, on DraftKings, I can get there at 5,500. On FanDuel, at 7,400. It just feels like no man's land on this slate when it's like, I'll pay for May or pay for Stafford a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like this spot for Stafford, double stacks. Kenneth Walker is probably going to be in most people's lineup, and I'm probably just going to eat the chalk. And then it just kind of comes down to the Puka JSN, who outscores one another, or does JSN outscore him relative to his cost? Cooper Kupp is going to show up in a lot of optimals, which is not a sentence we thought we would say. 3,800. Last week, you can't really use last week's stats, though. Like, I was going through and I was like, he was targeted on 36% of the routes. He led the team in first read targets. Cooper Kupp, it's playoff Cooper Kupp. Their team ran such few routes. Like, I think he ran like 12. It just didn't matter. So at the end of the day, if a 3,800 Cooper Kupp is going to be the popular cheap piece, it's like, I feel like I can go elsewhere on the slate.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. He is a guy that I think if you are, again, like if you're ahead in the early window and you're doing pretty well, I think Kupp's totally fine. Same with Ken Walker. Like, you kind of just eat the chalk and you take the projection. But like, would anybody be surprised if he came away with this game with like 4.5 points? Of course not, right? So again, generally speaking, cheap players in DFS are priced where they are for a reason. And I will usually try to lean away from that whenever possible in roster percentage. So yeah, I mean, I'll have some Cooper Kupp, but definitely not going to be overweight by any means.
Yeah, just the revenge narrative is not what you want to do. Rashid Shaheed, your boy. I know that you've been thinking about him. You always love playing Rashid Shaheed.
That's RB2, Rashid Shaheed to you, brother.
Do you think he gets a couple carries?
We did take his over on his rushing.
Okay. Are you playing him though? That's my question.
Well,
I know
Kyle,
we're going to get.
Do you want to have a good time and double dip with the Rashid Shaheed return touchdown and the Seattle defense? Because that sounds like fun. I actually had that last week on FanDuel and it hit. There's nothing better in the world than a double dip when you get the returner and the DST in the same lineup. It was glorious. That said, he doesn't really run a ton of routes. And like he is so electric with the ball in his hands, but at the same time, it's kind of hard to project return touchdowns, which he kind of has needed to get there from a fantasy perspective. The receiving totals really haven't been very high. And if we think this may not be a huge spot for Sam Darnold, it's kind of a tough sell on the non-JSN guys. So even though I was into him last week, I just thought there was a good chance they could have success against San Francisco. I probably won't have much Rashid Shaheed this week. I will definitely have a little bit more Cooper Kupp than Rashid Shaheed.
All right, so I think I'm probably going to be underweight Sam Darnold. I still like JSN at his price, but I'm looking at some of the stacks that I wrote up in Pace of Play. It's like I'm pretty much going to have Kenneth Walker and everything. I do think there is a chance that if Devontae Adams has 2 touchdowns, then you're playing Kenneth Walker, JSN together, and I'm using May from the other game or Stidham.
Makes sense to me.
Okay. And I think the narrative at play in me is what you brought up earlier. If Stafford and McVay felt like they didn't have their crap together last week, I feel like they get it together this week. So I'll take the Rams.
I think I'm going to take the Rams too. I think better quarterback, more experienced coach. The line concerns for Seattle with the left tackle spot. I'll take the Rams. Honestly, this is a coin flip game, so it should be really fun to watch.
Slate Breaker of the Week.
We kind of touched on it earlier, and I hope we're not thinking about the same guy because we know for sure. We're
thinking about the same guy. Go ahead.
Okay, James Cook is another one of our slate breakers because he is our slate breaker every week.
James Cook from the couch?
Oh man, I really need to go back and see how many times we've talked about James Cook. Ramondre Stevenson, is that what we're talking about?
That's what I was going to go with.
Let's just go in together. Let's go broke, Hey, how about this? If he doesn't hit, you and I will just find some other jobs because we're out.
I won't accept that, Kyle. All right, you're going with Ramondre.
You got another.
Let me give a nasty that I think I want to be overweight on the nasty boys. It's hard to find cheap players, and I think one of the cheap guys will define the slate. And I'm going to go with Terrence Ferguson as not a slate breaker, but
I
just
knew
like
you were going to say that too.
He's the guy in part of the Stafford stacks that unlocks the salary. 2 catches, one of them's a touchdown. He's in the optimal.
Okay.
T-Ferg.
Yeah, it's a fun slate, and we're going to be talking about these players again over the next couple of weeks. So, if it's Terrence Ferguson, if it's Lil Jordan, any of these boys, if it's George Halani, who knows? We're going to be talking about these guys.
I'm tired of trying to figure out the Rams tight ends. Like I just said I thought they might win this game, but I'm kind of tired of talking about them for playoffs. So maybe we should root for Seattle.
Prop it like it's hot.
If you want all of our props that are available to you in the DFS Pass, dfspass.com, you get notified in our Discord. And I have a fun one here because I'm going to go right back to the Rams tight ends just because you were talking about it. It's Tyler Higbee, who feels like he's been in the league, well, since your grandmother was in the league. But the line I have in front of me is over 15.5 receiving yards. You might say to yourself, whoa, Kyle, giving an over. All right. He has hit this in his last 6 games, and he's hit it in 9 of his last 10 games. The game that he didn't hit it, he had 4 targets. He went 3 for 13 and 1 touchdown. If you would have told me he gets 4 targets and doesn't hit this line, it stinks. Don't look at the route participation last week because we mentioned earlier that we mentioned last week that they went to 11 personnel, I think they go back to a lot of 12 and 13. Last week, he did go over this line with 27 receiving yards. So Tyler Higbee, the ancient one, over 15.5 receiving yards.
Yeah, definitely don't look at the routes from last week. He definitely didn't run 8. Don't worry about that. We're definitely not taking an over on a player that ran 8 routes last week. Don't worry about that. What we are going to do, Kyle, is take another over because overs are way more fun than unders. We took Rashid Shaheed, I already mentioned, over 0.5 rushing yards, a single yard. And the rationale here is like, look, if they got some line issues, if they want to protect Darnold, they can't give Ken Walker 26 carries. Like, do they trust George Halani, who's been on IR since November? Probably not. Cam Akers, who knows? They probably give Rashid Shaheed a carry or two in this game on an end around, something like that, design touches. He has a single rush attempt, at least one, in 7 of his 10 games since the trade to Seattle. So we'll take over 0.5 rushing yards for Rashid Shaheed.
Is there anything better than on Sunday watching the game with your family, your significant others, and you see an end around that goes for a yard, and you're pumping your fist, and they're like, "What happened?" You're like, "No. The real ones know that Rashid Shaheed did it a yard."
But what if he gets 2, and 1 goes for a yard, and then a negative 2-yard play?
Well, what's crazy is that they are the team that, like, that's the Kenneth Walker thing, right? Like, he hits his prop, and then you're like, "Oh my gosh, Kenneth Walker's going to go for -10 on this next carry."
Yep.
That's exactly what's going to happen. All right, that's going to do it for us. We will have an episode next week, kind of previewing the Super Bowl, and then we'll have another episode, final one of this season. We will go through all things DFS for the Super Bowl. Betz, sign us off.
Yes, sir. Man, not too many shows left this year. I'm kind of sad about that, but it should be an awesome slate this weekend. 2 really good games going on. Hopefully you guys enjoy the football. Good luck in DFS, good luck in props, and then Kyle, like said, back next week to preview part 1 of the Super Bowl. We'll see you then. Enjoy the games.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at thefantasyfootballers.com.